Okay, so we've drawn the first figure using contrapposto, but the thing is, in a life drawing class and with a model, you're often going to have a pose where you're just seeing one side of the model. So it's going to be really rare that you're going to see a model just facing straight towards you. So I want to show an example of doing a pose with contrapposto, but from the side. So we're going to start this pose, draw a straight line down your page, and we're just going to mark out a section for the head. So I'm just going to mark out one head's length here. Okay, and now for poses on the side, this is going to be a 3/4 view, so you can still hold your pencil out to the model to get that angle. I've got this angle here. But the other thing we can start to do is think about where the sides of the shoulders are to know the length of this by looking at the angle of the top of the head to the shoulder blade. And what that's going to do is that angle is going to limit the sides of our figure. So by simply putting your pencil in the air, looking for the top of the head and going from side to side, I can create two angles which limit the space that the shoulders can occupy. So this is the tilt of the shoulders that I have here. And the shoulders are coming about 1/2, maybe 1/3 of a head's length down. The neck is a complicated organ. You want to think about the neck is not just stuck onto the head, but starting within the figure. So it can be difficult to figure out where that point is, but I'm just going to, or what part of the neck you're drawing. So I'm just putting a dot here. Okay, now about 1.5 head's lengths down is where we're going to get to the rib cage. So I'm just going to mark this off here. And then the hips will start about 1/2 of a head's length down here. They are at an angle too, but in my reference, this angle is obscured by one of her hands. So it makes it a little bit more tricky to look at what that angle for the hips are. It gets easier over time, but that's why we can just put a placeholder in. So I know that this angle is going to be going to the side, because the thing is, all of these initial marks can be erased. So, if you're really struggling going, I don't see these lines, I don't see these connections, we're just getting some scaffolding down. So, these lines are just to help us place everything. Okay, let's move on to the leg. So the leg coming towards us is going to have a bit of foreshortening because the thigh is coming towards us. So let's make that about 1 and a little less than a calf length long. So this will go here. Sorry, head's length long. I'm just going to mark out where the kneecap is. The kneecap is, this leg is quite closer to us, so it's about 1/2 of a head's length. Then I'm going to mark out about 1.5 head's length to the ankle. Draw an angle there and a straight line here. So we have the leg coming forward. And now that we've done all of this, let's start to think about contrapposto at an angle and that sense of counterbalance. So I'm going to draw an oval tilting backwards to center the form around. The hips are going to come forward. And we can describe the hips again using that box shape, tilting forwards. And then we can start to attach the leg to the hip. So let's move up here. So it's just intersecting on that line there. Then let's get the rest of the details of the torso. So the angle of the breasts, I can just hold my pencil out to get that angle. It's going to be about halfway down the rib cage from here. So I've just drawn an angle there. Remember, as you go along, you can hold your pencil out to figure out where different parts of the figure are placed. And we've got, and remember that objects, as you kind of move to the side, these shapes, an oval or a round shape becomes more oval as you move towards the side. So if we're doing the breasts, we're going to get, for one, more of an oval shape, and then for another, more of a circular shape. Okay, let's move on to the shoulder blades. I'm just going to draw a circle as a placeholder for one of these. We've got our belly button about here, so that's actually, sorry, it's a little bit lower than the bottom of the rib cage. So around there. And one of the most important things just to kind of learn here is that you want to be making sketchy marks as you go along. You're not going to get it perfect on the first go, so having the scaffolding is useful. Now I'm going to move down the breastbone into the stomach area just to align the features of the torso. And start to add in this arm here. So I'm going to look at where the belly button is and that angle to figure out where her arm is tilted. I'm just going to come down to the outside of the arm. And she's holding it fairly stiffly over her leg. I'm just going to look at this angle too. And again, the hands, we just want to block. And from here, I can start to add in the flesh. So flesh and muscle is going to wrap over these bony appendages that I've marked out. Now I can move on to the other arm and the side of the figure, and because of perspective, this other shoulder, we've got like the shoulder blade that we can see, but the shoulder is also going to be, if this is more of a circle, this is going to be more of a narrow oval because we're only seeing part of it. And it's further away. So here I'm going to look at the negative space in between the sides of the rib cage, which I'm arranging along the line of the spine, which I've put down here, or the line of the breastbone, apologies. And I'm going to get the sides of the arms just by looking at this little sliver of space in between the torso and the arms. So I'm going to come down like this, move forwards. And the abdomen, the shape of the abdomen or the abdominal sheath, so the set of muscles here, is kind of like, if you can think of like a wasp's thorax. So it's kind of like wasp shaped there. Okay, so now I'm going to add in the details of the hands. We've got our belly button here. We'll get a finger here. Just going to do the angle of the knuckles. And now we can get in the other leg. So again, I'm just following the shape of the hips. I'm looking at where the other leg intersects with the first leg I've put down. Just imagining this shape continuing through. So you might want to just even draw an oval just to make sure that you're continuing that line through. I'm checking where the bottom of the knee is just by looking at where it rests on the other leg. Just going to do a little oval for the muscle of the calf. And I can also see where the other foot is by just comparing where it sits along the line of the first foot. Same with the angles. So just looking at where that sits along that line. Finally moving into the neck. Let's see, angle of the neck. And now the chin. I can start to tilt her face a little bit to the side. going to do a center line. This is a line that goes straight down in between the eyes and in between the bottom of the lips. And then halfway down the face, a line for the eyes. For moving back, getting some of the angles of the neck in. The neck is always going to kind of curve. It's not just going to stick onto the head. It's going to have kind of a triangle shape because of the trapezius muscle behind it and the fact that it actually starts lower down on the figure. And finally, we can kind of shade in this area and add in some hair. Okay, and now to do details, so we're going to lightly erase this. Okay, and using these marks, and this is why it's good to start with an H pencil. Again, I just want this to be visible on the screen, and in class I'll also be using a heavier pencil just so it's visible, but using a high H pencil is useful because then you don't have to erase these marks. I'm just going to go around and mark out kind of the areas of shade here. I'm not going to try to do any kind of complicated gradients because I'm just getting down the gist of the figure, and portraiture and all of that is a whole other realm. So let's get this hair. Okay, let's get this shadow. So I'm just looking at like the proportion of the shadows. I'm marking out where these sections are. This kind of blocking is a good thing to do if you're at all interested in painting. It's also really good for learning the proportion of various parts of the figure because you want to start to look at light and shade as having proportion. You know, outlines aren't the only thing that have like a proportionate sense to them. So shade, light and shade, that's proportion as well. And I'm using the forms that I can see underneath the erasing marks just to figure out the placement of the contours. So contours are all these curving lines that occur on the outside of the figure. I'm just relying on these forms underneath to figure out where the outlines are. So contours are kind of like outlines. Just sharpen my pencil. I'm just marking out the areas of shade on the abdomen. Again, this isn't a very detailed drawing. I just want to show you kind of how you use these initial marks to figure out both shading and the outlines, because we have these through marks going throughout the figure. And the importance there is that this helps not just with the placement of the parts, but the placement of the shading, because shading is going to follow in a general way the forms that we're putting down. Just marking out the hand here. Again, not putting a lot of detail in. And finally, I'm just gonna put some shadows down, which can be helpful when you have like foreshortened feet, because it kind of sets the figure on the ground. It just shows where the figure is resting, and I'm just gonna shade that.